Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, today I have Lisa Audet on the line, and she's founder and CEO over at Tall Trees Capital Management LP, and this episode is part of our iConnections Miami series, where we bring you the best of those who attended and participated in iConnections that took place in Miami. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Hi, Adam. It's great to be here with you. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, so we got a lot to talk about today. So obviously we're going to be getting into the world of energy and energy abundance. I want to get into what you're doing, of course, at Tall Trees Capital. But before we get into that, iConnections Miami, is this your first conference? Have you been to one of these before? Give us a little bit of the backstory.
Yeah, thanks so much for asking. This was, as you say, this is our first appearance at the iConnections Global Alts Conference in Miami, and we had a fantastic experience. It was in terms of how they prepared us for the conference and our ability to reach out to so many potential investors, and it was, we had so many amazing meetings there, and just become a huge fan of the platform, of the team at iConnections, and really looking forward to future events.
Yeah, by the way, this is our first time covering the conference as well. I just kept hearing this, iConnections. Adam, you got to make it out. You got to check out what's going on. You hear it enough and you're like, all right, they got me. I'll go. Let's see what's going on.
Right.
And I cover conferences all around the world, huge conferences, everything from Davos to Milken to you name it. I tend to be there. In fact, right now I'm in Miami at FII and recording this in between, Lisa, because I've been trying to get you on the show for a while. So I'm curious. I'm sure you've been to many conferences. What made this special, or what made this one feel a little bit unique?
I think it was just such an efficient way to meet so many potential allocators and also other fund managers. So it was both kind of catching up with fund managers that I've known for years, some of my former colleagues, and really just, meeting kind of all these potential investors who are very excited about what we're doing in the energy space and wanted to learn more. So it was just kind of amazing for us.
Yeah, the tech, the app, all the ways that the meetings were set up, from what I'm understanding from all these interviews I've done, it was just highly efficient too, a good use of time.
It was
to meet people.
It was, and we did the remote, so we had to get up and walk to each meeting, and I think for us we got in our steps on top of it. So it was a win-win
team,
all the way around. Exactly.
Oh, wonderful. Well, switching focus here slightly, let's get into Tall Trees Capital. Maybe start by telling us a little bit about the firm.
Sure. So Tall Trees Capital invests innovatively in the energy transition. So we launched in April of 2022, and really we take a very pragmatic and holistic approach to the energy transition. So we're focused neither entirely on sort of energy security nor on decarbonization, but really looking at how can we invest in companies across various sectors and really focus on companies that are helping to meet energy demand, helping to create a low carbon economy, and most importantly, helping to create a world of energy abundance where everyone has access to the energy they need, and the energy is available, it's reliable, it's low carbon, and most importantly, it's affordable.
Now, of course, you're the founder of the firm, and I'm just curious on your end, given what made you choose to go down this route of focusing specifically on this niche, so to speak? How did that come about? A lot of different things, obviously, you can focus your time on. Why this?
So I have a background in energy and commodities, and I spent quite a lot of time in my career working overseas in economies that were very focused on natural resources and energy. So it sort of, kind of came up through my career, kind of really being focused on those sectors. And I think a big part of my career was living in Africa. And I think, it's a place that, really, where one really senses, the challenges around energy security. And I think I just, really became excited about energy as life, energy that really, having access to energy really determines our standard of living, our access to education, our access to healthcare, and really thinking about the fact that there's 8 billion people on the planet, and 1 billion people like you and me, have access to abundant energy, while 7 billion people have limited or no access. So really thinking about how closing that gap is not only a moral imperative, but one of the best investment opportunities that we believe will play out over the next few decades. So really just thinking through kind of this as sort of a key challenge, and how can we be part of the solution in helping to close that gap?
Can you go a little bit, for those that haven't invested heavily in this sector, can you go a little bit further into like some of the opportunity that you see and why you feel this is a special place to be?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we're in just an incredibly interesting time when it comes to energy, so we're in this environment of heightened geopolitical uncertainty, and then we ask ourselves, how can we even think about energy security, let alone energy abundance in this kind of environment? So, I mean, I would just like to say, as regards the current war in the Middle East, we're cautiously optimistic that what appears to be the beginning of negotiations to end the war continues to move in the right direction, and that some agreement, can be reached between the parties. But, we're of the view that ultimately some agreement will be reached, and we'll start to see some oil and gas to resume transiting, through the Strait of Hormuz, maybe not at the same levels as before, but significantly above where we are today. Increasing flows through the Strait together with these additional barrels that have been released by the IEA and some of these strategic petroleum reserves, as well as, some of these previously sanctioned barrels, we think it should provide some relief. We think Brent crude prices will start to decline. I mean, ultimately, we think no one benefits in the global economy from high oil and gas prices. So we think that that efforts will come to bear on finding a solution that will bring prices down. And we think, actually higher oil and gas prices right now just accelerate what we believe is already this transition to a more diversified kind of energy resource base. And, true energy security really comes from an energy supply that is diversified, independent, and flexible. So we look at a country like China, which is primarily a coal producer, but has added tremendous amounts of solar, wind, and nuclear to its energy mix. And obviously that's an advantage in the current environment. I mean, Europe, after Russia invaded Ukraine and they were dependent, 40% of their gas supply came from Russia, and they have aggressively diversified into renewables, into solar, into wind. And we're seeing the benefits of that in an environment that like what we have today, with very high oil and gas prices. Although they still are dependent on LNG and sort of gas supplies, so that part of it will be challenging going forward, but certainly slightly less challenging because they have diversified more. Certain countries have diversified more into nuclear and into renewables. In the U.S., I mean, I think the U.S. obviously is an oil and gas producer, so somewhat immune, from some of the geopolitical challenges that are creating higher oil and gas prices. But I think what is probably not recognized is that the U.S. has also moved aggressively into a solar build out, particularly in the utility solar space. So, I mean, that is going to be, and obviously we're bringing back, we have existing nuclear capacity. We're bringing back some of the former nuclear capacity that had been decommissioned. So I think, the U.S. is also moving, to an energy mix, which is more diversified, which will be very helpful in the current environment.
Can you go a little bit further into that concept of what's being misunderstood, specifically in this niche and when it comes to the energy transition? Like, what are some of those maybe concepts out there that people have that are just maybe a little bit off?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I think people tend to think about the energy transition as either just energy security or decarbonization. They think about it in a very binary way. And when we've looked at how people approach it or talk about it, it's either just about having enough energy to meet demand or sort of all about decarbonization. And I think the way we like to think about it is that it's not really siloed. It's really about how to provide abundant, reliable, low carbon, affordable energy to everyone. And the way to do that is to think about investing across multiple sectors. It's really about the energy transition. It's almost like the internet. It touches every sector. It matters for everyone. We all need to think about how we can use technology to help meet growing demand because, as I mentioned before, 7 billion people that don't have access to, have limited or no access to energy. So how do we bring energy to the bulk of the planet's population so that they can also live lives that are energy abundant? But then it's also about low carbon, right? Like we obviously want to make sure that, the additional resources that we're bringing to the energy sector are low carbon. So, when we've seen, and I think people are sort of misunderstanding how much penetration there has been globally when we think about EV, solar, wind, heat pumps. So, I mean, if you're living in the U.S., I think obviously we're an oil and gas, we have abundant oil and gas reserves. So that has been the primary source of energy, even though we're building out, utility solar and nuclear and other forms of energy. But globally, I think we're seeing, a real, even in countries that are oil and gas producers like Brazil, like the UAE, we're seeing a big move into solar and into EVs. So I know, having traveled quite a bit globally last year, driving an EV in the south of France made in China, kind of looking out in South Africa at many homes, seeing the majority of homes have solar panels on the roof. And so this is, for us, super exciting and also very encouraging, because not only is it providing a source of energy that is lower cost to these countries, it's allowing them to become more independent and to have more energy security. So when we have spiking oil and gas prices, if you have an economy that's moving more into solar, obviously you're creating more independence. You're creating more reliable, you're creating more independence, and you're not as vulnerable to these higher fossil fuel prices. So I think people are perhaps not understanding really the level of penetration of renewables across the world and how that's really helping to create energy security and energy independence.
Amazing. Lisa, this has been a lot of fun having you on the show today and learning more. I learned a lot, and I'm better educated on this topic now, and I hope my audience is as well. That being said, if somebody wants to learn more about your work at Tall Trees Capital Management, LP, or connect with your team, how do they do that?
Well, thanks so much for that. Yeah, they can reach us at www.talltreescap.com, and you can always find me on LinkedIn as well.
Fantastic. For everybody listening, just so you know, we'll definitely put some links in the show notes so that you can just click on the link, head right on over, check out Lisa and her team. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. You heard me correct. This is daily. Each and every day, we're bringing you new stories, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way on your journey as well. So hit that subscribe or follow button. And Lisa, been so much fun, and thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks so much, Adam. It's been a pleasure.